Hey pals, I'm here today to talk about the 5 books I read in the month of January. January was a pretty shoddy reading month because I only read 5 books, even though I was hoping to read a lot more than that. And I DNF'd 3 books, and I actually got quite a decent way into each of those books before I decided to DNF them. And out of the 5 books I finished, I only really enjoyed one of them. So yeah, had a pretty bad reading month. A lot of these books were my own books I got really recently, so that was quite a shame. And yeah, it meant I read a bit less because I felt less compelled to pick books up. But also I do tend to read a bit less in January because I love all the sort of end of the year booktube content and the start of the new year. So the first couple of weeks I was watching quite a decent amount of booktube and also board game YouTube videos, and I have definitely slowed down on that. One of my resolutions was to try and watch less YouTube this year and to focus more on my reading, and I do definitely feel compelled to do that. I have been much better with not just watching every single video on my subscription feed. And yeah, I am really hopeful that February will be a much better reading month. So even though I've had a poor start to the year, it hasn't sort of dampened my reading spirits. So there's that. So I'm going to crack on. I will leave the book I enjoyed the most until the end, so we sort of, you know, build up to greatness and start off with the ones that I, probably don't have much to say about. First one is a short story collection called Hearts and Bones, Love Songs for Late Youth by Niamh Mulvey. I loved this cover and I like the sound of the premise of this one. We are following predominantly young women, middle-aged women. There's a couple of men we follow as well, I think. They're all Irish, but they all live in different locations. And yeah, sort of following their stories. Quite a lot of these stories are quite sort of bleak or melancholy. They're quite slow. They don't have some big like epic reveal or anything like that, and that's fine with me, but I did find this quite forgettable. I read the first 2 stories and I just felt quite meh, and I sort of left this as currently reading for like a week without picking it up, which is never a good sign because I should feel compelled to pick it back up. And I did finish it in like one evening and found the later stories were stronger. And there's one in particular, I think, called The Doll, which is from 3 different perspectives, following this group of people over an amount of years, which I did think was a pretty good story. But yeah, in general, I found this all sort of good enough. There's nothing I can critique about the writing, but I also found this pretty forgettable, and I don't feel compelled to sort of follow what this author brings out in the future. So yeah, this one was a bit of a disappointment. I liked it, but I don't really have much to say about it. So there is that one. Then this next one I actually listened to on audio, and that is Sphere by Nicola Griffith. The author narrates it herself on audio. This is a fantasy novella, as you can see. And yeah, I was pretty disappointed in this one. I'd give this like 2.5 stars. Premise of this is we're following a young woman who presents herself as a man because she wants to be part of the King's Guard, basically the Knights of the Round Table. This is King Arthur retelling. So we follow her as a young girl, and then as she grows up and sort of trains herself to be a sort of soldier, and then as she tries to join the Knights of the Round Table. What I found about this a bit frustrating is, in general, the writing style is a little bit more distant than I would like. I think I would have preferred this to be a full-length novel with like a lot more development of the characters, and that's just not the way the author decided to go, which is fine. Secondly, I find it a little bit annoying when someone has like this, I don't know, sort of magical ability bestowed upon them that means they're absolutely bloody fantastic at everything, which is the premise of this book. That's never like that exciting a premise to read, I don't think. I also felt that I didn't really understand why the character wanted to join the King's Guard, and when she meets them, the king comes across as a bit of a dick, and she just says that's like what she's destined to do, and there's no real discussion as to why. So I found that a bit frustrating. I was also excited for this to be, this queer story because our protagonist presents as a guy, but actually within the story, she is referenced as a woman throughout and refers to herself as a woman, but keeps that secret because she wants to be a soldier. So this is like a queer romance in that throughout the novel she does have relationships with women, which I thought were really well written. But I thought this might be an exploration of a trans character in a historical time period, which I don't really think it is. So yeah, this was just fine. I think a lot of people would enjoy this more than me, but there was just that sort of distance I felt when listening to this one. So there was that. The next book I'm not really going to talk about because this was the January Patreon book club pick, so I'll be doing a spoilery video over on my Patreon, and that book is The Street by Ann Petrie. I didn't enjoy this book. I have a lot of respect for the message this book was sending, the topics it was talking about at the time it was published, which was the 1940s. I think it was way ahead of its time, and I would love to read a non-fiction book by this author, so I'm going to look to see if she wrote any non-fiction, but I didn't love the writing style itself, which I'll talk much more about in the video over on Patreon. And then the final one I didn't enjoy is the third book in a fantasy series. That fantasy series is called The 12 Houses, and the third book is called Dark Moon Defender by Sharon Shin. So I read Mystic and Rider last year, which is the first book in this series. I really enjoyed it. Really sort of easy, cosy fantasy with a romance and really great found family vibes. Really liked it. Second book wasn't very good, but I saw the reviews on Goodreads and saw that was the sort of general consensus, but the people then really liked the third book. So I was reading this and it took me a while to realise that I just wasn't feeling compelled to pick it up. And when I would sit and read a chunk, I'd enjoy a little bit, but a lot of it I'd just be a bit like, meh. And then when I got quite close to the end, I was like, shall I give up on it? And I was like, I'm just going to finish it because I'm so near the end. And like, you know, I really love the first book, so it makes you convinced you should be really enjoying the subsequent books. And when I got to the end of this, I was like, oh, you know, I feel a bit disappointed. So then I went and had a look to see if anyone else had, you know, given it low ratings. And I found a few people who had. And the things they were saying was like, yeah, that is completely what I thought. So I was like, I'm not just like losing my mind. Like, you know, this definitely wasn't a very good read for me. So a couple of core things I didn't like about this one. The first one is the core romance. I don't like the message it sends. So in each book you follow a different member of this fan family as they find a romance. In this one you're following a member of the Kingsguard. He is a fairly sort of stereotypical man, okay, in that he's like an elite soldier and he had quite a difficult upbringing. He's never felt any sort of romantic love for a woman, and he's very big and strong. And he gets paired with this woman who is very small and petite and frail and seemingly, weak and needs protection. She does have her own magical abilities, which mean that she can protect herself fairly well, which I was hoping the book would lean into a bit more, but it didn't. And by the end, the message is still that he's sort of, big and strong and will protect her, which I really don't like. Also, a core message in the first book was the main character's complete disregard for the class distinctions in this kingdom and these sort of hierarchies between people, and I loved her for that. And in this book, it's like she's bought into the class distinctions, and I really didn't like that. I also thought there was a couple of comments from other characters about the protagonist's love interests, which were a bit like not great, and wasn't a great way for a woman to characterise another woman. I also felt like the main plot for this, outside of the romance, was a bit bizarre. Like, he's sent as a member of the Kingsguard to do this secret mission, but he's not really gathering much information. And there's a certain point in the novel, probably a third of the way through, where he's got the information he needs, but he just stays anyway. And it's just like what's he even doing here? Like, there's all this stuff going on in the kingdom, and he's just like dilly-dallying about falling in love with this woman. So it all felt very bizarre. I'm not going to carry on. I bought all 3 books at the start of January, thinking I would want to absolutely speed through them, and I am now unhauling all of them except for the first book. So that's a shame, but it's just one of those things. The last book I'm going to talk about, and a book I actually did enjoy, is This Golden State by Marit Weisenberg. I picked this up on Rincey's recommendation over at Rincey Read because it was one of her favourite reads of 2022, and I listened to this one on audio, and it's quite odd because this is a young adult book. I don't tend to enjoy young adult books, but in particular I never listen to them on audio because I find it quite cringe hearing an adult narrator try to sound like a teenager, but I thought this one was done really well. I didn't find it annoying at all, and I did enjoy listening to this one, although I think had I been reading it physically I would have sped through it. But because I was listening on audio, I sort of just listened when I had the time, so it took me a bit longer to read than it would have if I was reading it physically. The premise of this is that we're following I think she's 17 years old, she's called Poppy, and she lives with her parents and her 8-year-old sister. And right at the start of the novel, she reveals that her parents have been on the run Poppy's whole life, on the run from the police. And so every few months, they move state, they get completely new identities, and they start over, basically. And that has been Poppy's entire life. And so she's never been able to build any meaningful relationship. She can never tell anyone her real name. And she's getting to a point where she's considering whether she can go to college, because she's a really gifted student, and realising that that's not really going to be a possibility because she doesn't have an actual student record, because she's been 17 different people in her years as a student. And it's her starting to question the decisions her parents have made for her and who those decisions are really benefiting, and her starting to question, who she really is. This all takes place over one summer when they move to California, and her parents seem to be losing control a little bit. And at the same time as they're sort of losing control, she joins this elite maths club where she meets this young boy, or young man I should say, who she develops a friendship and then sort of a romance with, at the same time as she starts to, try and figure out who her parents really are. I really enjoyed this. This is quite sort of slice of life compared to, a lot of YA I've picked up in the past. Feels quite fast paced, can be quite, themes that feel like they shouldn't be so dramatised or really over the top, which I get, that's how things are for teenagers, but I find it quite annoying to read as an adult reader. Whereas Poppy's situation is really frustrating, and as an adult reader, I was so annoyed with her parents and was so desperate for Poppy to be given answers, and was so really along for the ride when she was trying to figure this all out. Rincey mentioned in her review that this book reminded her of The Unseen World by Liz Moore, which is an adult literary fiction book that I absolutely love. And I completely agree. The whole time I was reading this book, I was thinking, God, I really need to pick The Unseen World up again, because a lot of similar themes. I think this Golden State is a YA combo of The Unseen World by Liz Moore, which I loved, and Mary Jane by Jessica Anya Blau, which I listened to last year and loved. So yeah, if you've read either of those and enjoyed them, then I'd give this Golden State a go. And if you've read this Golden State and enjoyed it, then I would give those two a go. So yeah, I gave this 4 stars. It's quite rare for me to give a YA book 5 stars if there is a romance in it, because I find that romances in YA books tend to be quite rushed. These people have only known one another for a summer. Things seem to get high stakes quite quickly. And also, as a 33-year-old, I'm not really rooting for two 17-year-olds having their first kiss together. Feels a little bit odd. So that is the part of the novel that I really could have done without. I'd probably have enjoyed this book more had that been a friendship. But yeah, I still really enjoyed this, and we'll have a look into what else this author has written, because yeah, this was a really fun audiobook, and I'm really glad Rincey raved about it, because I had never heard of it before that. So yeah, those are the books I read in January. Fingers crossed for a better reading month in February. I'd love to know if you've read any of these books, and if you have, what your thoughts were on them. And I'd also love to know how your January reading month went. Hopefully much better than mine. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye.